The sky was burning. Explosions shook the ground. Smoke covered everything. It was the sound of war, loud, deadly, endless. On a ruined battlefield, two great armies fought with no mercy. The aliens, tall and powerful, attacked with laser weapons. The humans, smaller but clever, fought back with tanks, guns, and smart tactics. In the middle of this chaos was Commander Vitra, the strongest alien warrior. She was famous in the galaxy, feared by humans and respected by her people. She was tall, with purple skin and sharp eyes. She had won many battles. She believed she was unbeatable. But that day, everything changed. Vetra was leading her soldiers forward, crushing humans one by one. Her sword, glowing with energy, cut through metal and flesh. She felt proud, strong, unstoppable. Then came the blast. A human missile struck the ground near her. The explosion was massive. She didn't even see it coming. The force threw her high into the air. When she landed, she felt nothing in her legs. She tried to stand, but she couldn't. She looked down. Her legs were gone. Blood was pouring out. Metal pieces were inside her body. She screamed, but the noise of war was louder. Her vision blurred. Her body was cold. She called her soldiers, her friends, but none came. She saw them running away, retreating. "Wait!" She shouted, "I'm alive, don't leave me." But they didn't stop. They didn't even look back. Vetra's heart broke more than her body. She was not a warrior anymore. She was just a broken thing. Weak, helpless. She lay on the ground, her life fading. The battlefield was empty now. Smoke and fire were everywhere. She waited for death, but then footsteps. Someone was coming. She grabbed her weapon, though her arms were weak. She thought, if I die, I'll die fighting. Through the smoke, a figure appeared. A human, a Marine. His armor was scratched, his face dirty, but his eyes were sharp. He looked at her, surprised she was still breathing. Vetra pointed her weapon at him, but her hand was shaking. "Do it," she spat. "Kill me, human." But the Marine didn't shoot. He didn't even raise his gun. He walked closer, slowly, watching her with a strange look. Not hate, not fear, but curiosity. "You're still alive," he said quietly. "Not for long," she replied, coughing blood. "Just finish it." But he didn't. He knelt beside her. "Why?" she asked, her voice weak. "Why are you not killing me?" The Marine shrugged. "You're a soldier, like me. I don't kill soldiers who can't fight." Vetra laughed bitterly. "Then leave." "I'll die anyway." But he shook his head. "No, I don't leave people behind." She stared at him, confused. "I'm not your people." He smiled a little. "Doesn't matter." Before she could argue, he lifted her up. She was heavy, but he carried her on his back. "What are you doing?" she whispered. "You're insane." "Probably," the Marine said. "But I'm not leaving you to die here." She wanted to fight him, to escape, but she had no strength left. Her body was broken. Her pride was broken. As he carried her through the burning field, she asked, "What's your name, human?" "Sergeant Mason," he replied. "Sergeant Mason," she repeated, almost mocking. "You'll die for nothing. We'll see." They moved carefully. Dead bodies, broken machines, and craters surrounded them. The air was toxic, the sky dark. Yet Mason didn't stop. Vetra couldn't understand. Why would a human save an enemy? It made no sense. Humans were supposed to be cruel, weak, selfish. But Mason was none of those things. He was stubborn, strong, determined. Vetra felt her eyes closing. She was losing blood fast. She thought, maybe it's better this way. Maybe dying in the arms of an enemy is still better than being left alone. But before she passed out, Mason said something she would never forget. "You're not dying today. Not on my watch." And then darkness took her, but Mason kept walking, somewhere. In the distance, other soldiers were moving. Danger was coming. But Mason didn't care. He had made a choice. He would save her. No matter what. Sergeant Mason walked with heavy steps. His back ached, his arms burned. But he didn't stop. On his back, the alien warrior Vetra hung unconscious. Blood dripped from her wounds. She was cold, but alive. Smoke still floated in the air. The battlefield was dead quiet now, except for distant gunfire far away. Mason knew he couldn't stay out in the open. If scouts or drones found them, they'd both be dead. He found a narrow path between rocks and burned trees. A small cave hid behind a hill. He pushed through, carrying Vetra inside. It was dark and cold, but it was shelter. He placed her down carefully. She looked so different now, not the fearsome warrior people spoke of. She looked broken. But Mason didn't see just an enemy. He saw a fighter. Someone left behind to die, just like some of his friends had been. He pulled out his medkit. Human tools weren't meant for alien bodies, but he did his best. He stopped the bleeding. He covered her stumps where her legs used to be. He wrapped her wounds tightly. Hours passed. Finally, she opened her eyes. She stared at the cave ceiling, blinking slowly. Then she turned her head and saw him sitting by the wall, checking his rifle. "You're still here," she whispered. Mason chuckled. "Did you think I'd leave?" She frowned. "Yes, that's what my people did." "Well, I'm not your people." She tried to sit up but winced in pain. "You should have killed me. Maybe, but I didn't." "Why?" Mason looked at her, his face serious. "Because I don't leave people behind." She scoffed. "I'm not your people. I'm your enemy." He shrugged. "Right now you're just someone who needs help." Vetra stared at him, confused. She didn't understand this human. Mercy was weakness where she came from. But this human showed mercy. Not because he was weak, but because he was strong. Enough to choose. She looked at her body, feeling the empty space where her legs were. Her voice broke a little. "I can't fight anymore. I'm useless." Mason shook his head. "You're alive. That means you're not useless. You don't know my world, human. Without my legs, I am nothing." He stared at her for a moment. "Then maybe it's time you saw things the human way." Vetra was silent. She felt weak, angry, confused. She wanted to hate him, but she couldn't understand why he saved her. Then she heard a sound. Footsteps. Heavy, slow. Mason stood up quickly, gun ready. He peeked outside the cave. Figures moved through the smoke, alien scouts. "There." "Searching," Mason whispered. Vetra's eyes widened. "They'll kill me if they find me." "And me," Mason added. He looked around the cave, thinking fast. Then he grabbed his knife, his rifle, and some explosives from his belt. "What are you doing?" Vetra asked. "Setting traps." "If they come, we fight." "You're insane." "Yeah," Mason smiled. "I've been told." He moved fast, setting up simple traps near the cave entrance. Wires, explosives, sharp spikes. It wasn't much, but it would slow them down. Vetra watched him work. She had never seen a human move like that. Calm, skilled, prepared. She realized then that humans weren't weak. They were dangerous because they never gave up, even in the worst situations. When Mason finished, he sat by the entrance, rifle in hand. "Try to rest," he told her. Vetra shook her head. "If we die together." Mason chuckled softly. "You catch on quick." She looked at him, still trying to understand. "You're a strange human." "Maybe, but strange is what keeps me alive." They waited in the dark. The sound of footsteps got closer. Shadows moved outside. The scouts were near. Vetra whispered, "You should leave me. Alone you might escape." Mason glanced back at her. Not a chance. Vetra closed her eyes for a moment. No one had ever said that to her. Not her people. Not her commanders, just this human. Then the first trap snapped. A scream echoed. Mason raised his gun. The fight was coming. Vetra felt something strange in her heart. Something new. She didn't want to die. And for the first time, she didn't want him to die either. The night was quiet, too quiet. But danger was close. Inside the small cave, Mason kept his rifle ready. His ears picked up every sound, every rock that moved, every breath of wind. He knew they were not alone anymore. Beside him, Vetra was awake. She listened too, though her body was weak. She could feel it. Hunters were coming. Suddenly, a sharp scream broke the silence. One of Mason's traps had caught its first victim. "They're here," Mason whispered. Vetra tried to move, but her body betrayed her. She had no legs. She felt useless. She clenched her fists, angry at herself. Mason loaded his gun, his voice calm but cold. "Stay down. Let me handle this." But Vetra shook her head. "I'm not cargo. I'm a warrior. Then fight with your mind. Stay sharp." Outside, alien scouts moved through the darkness. Tall, thin creatures with night vision eyes. They spoke in their own tongue, hunting like wolves. One of them stepped over the tripwire. A small explosion blew off its legs. It screamed, crawling. Another scout fired blindly into the dark, but Mason was ready. He aimed carefully and shot, a clean headshot. Vetra watched, surprised. This human didn't just shoot wildly. He fought with patience, with focus. Every bullet was used wisely. Then the cave was silent again. Mason waited. He knew better. The last one was still out there. Then he heard a faint sound, breathing, close. Without warning, the last scout threw a grenade into the cave. Mason grabbed Vetra and rolled them both behind a rock just before the grenade exploded. The blast shook the cave, dust filling the air. Mason coughed, his ears ringing. But he pushed up, grabbing his rifle. Through the dust, the last scout charged in, a blade in hand, ready to finish them. Vetra reached for a rock, weak but desperate. Mason fired, but the scout was fast. The bullet hit its arm, but it kept coming. Scout raised its blade, but then Vetra threw the rock, hitting its head just enough to distract it. That gave Mason his chance. He shot twice, chest, then head. The scout fell. Dead. Silence returned. Mason sat down, breathing hard. "You okay?" he asked. Vetra nodded weakly. "I helped." "You did," Mason smiled. "Good throw." Vetra almost smiled too. Warrior fights any way she can." Mason looked at her. "You're not useless. Remember that." She stared at him, surprised. No one had said that to her before. The cave was safe, for now. Hours passed. Mason checked the dead scouts, collecting what little supplies he could find. Weapons, energy cells, food rations. Back in the cave, Vetra stared at the wall. Her mind was racing. She had always believed strength was only in the body, in power, but this human showed strength of the mind, of the will. She hated feeling weak. But she hated being left behind more. When Mason returned, she looked up. "Teach me." "Teach you what?" Mason asked. "Teach me how to fight." "The human way." Mason raised an eyebrow. "You can't even stand." "Then teach me to fight without standing." He studied her face. She wasn't joking. Her eyes burned with determination. "You sure?" "Yes," Mason smiled. "All right then. First lesson, never give up. Second, use everything you have." She nodded slowly. "I will learn." They sat together, surrounded by shadows and silence. But something had changed between them. They were not just enemies anymore. They were survivors. And survivors needed each other. Outside the cave, the night grew colder. But inside, a new fire was lit. The fire of warriors who refused to die. The sun was rising, but the light was weak. The sky still looked bruised, full of smoke and fire from days of battle. Inside the cave, Vetra sat up, her back against the wall. Her body still hurt, but her mind was clear. She watched Sergeant Mason as he prepared his weapons. his movements steady and precise. Vetra hated feeling helpless. She was a warrior, the strongest of her kind. Now she was a burden, but not for long. "Teach me," she said again. "I don't want to just sit here." Mason glanced at her. "I said I'd teach you. But it won't be easy. Nothing worth." "Learning is easy," Vetra replied. Mason smiled. He respected that answer. "All right," he said. He picked up a small knife and tossed it to her. She caught it awkwardly. Her hands were still weak. "Lesson 1, Mason said, sitting in front of her. "A human doesn't just fight with muscles. We fight with our minds first." Vetra frowned. "What do you mean?" "Strategy, patience, observation," Mason explained. "If you can't stand, use your arms. If your arms fail, use your brain." Vetra nodded slowly. Mason drew lines on the dusty ground with a stick. He showed her how to set traps, how to turn small rocks into weapons, how to use sound to confuse the enemy. Vetra listened, her pride quiet for once. She had never learned to fight this way. Hours passed. Vetra practiced holding the knife, throwing it, gripping it properly. Mason corrected her, showing her better ways. "You adapt fast," Mason said. "I must," she replied. "I will not stay weak." Mason saw the fire returning to her eyes. She was a warrior. Her pride wouldn't let her give up. Then, Mason pulled out a grenade. "This," he said, "is a human's favorite surprise." Vetra chuckled softly. "We use energy bombs. This is crude, but effective." Mason grinned. "That's the human way, crude but effective." They shared a brief laugh. For a moment, they weren't enemies. Just two fighters, surviving together. Then Vetra grew quiet. "Why do you care?" she asked. "Why help me?" Mason looked away. For a moment, his eyes darkened. "Because once," he said softly, "I left someone behind. I swore I'd never do it again." Vetra watched him closely. She saw pain in his eyes, a wound deeper than any gunshot. "You have honor," she said. "Maybe, or maybe I'm just stubborn." They sat in silence for a while. Then Mason stood up. "We'll need to move soon," he said. "They'll keep hunting." Vetra nodded. "I will fight when the time comes." "You'll fight better if you're stronger," Mason said. He pulled out a protein bar and threw it to her. "Eat." She caught it, looked at it, then bit into it. It tasted awful, but she didn't complain. Later, Mason worked on a rough sled from broken wood and metal. He planned to drag Vetra when they moved, faster than carrying her. Vetra watched his every move. "You think of everything," she said. "Soldiers survive by thinking ahead," Mason replied. She admired that. In her army, strength was everything. But humans had something more: adaptability. That night as they rested, Vetra whispered, "I will not be weak forever." Mason looked at her and smiled. "I believe you." Then she said something that surprised even herself. "When I stand again, I will fight beside you." Mason chuckled. "I'll hold you to that." In the dark cave, two warriors rested. One broken, one weary, but both alive. And both changing, outside. The wind howled, and far away, new enemies gathered. But Vetra was no longer just a fallen warrior. She was learning. And soon she would rise. The wind outside the cave had changed. It was colder now, and quiet, too quiet. Sergeant Mason knew that quiet was a bad sign. He stood at the cave entrance, eyes sharp. The sky was gray. Dust floated like dead snow. In the distance, shadows moved. They were not scouts. These were different. He could feel it. Back inside, Vetra sharpened a broken metal rod Mason had given her. She used her strong arms to shape it into a spear she could throw. She wasn't fast yet, but her hands were steadier. Mason came back, his voice serious. "We've got company." Vetra looked up. "Who?" "Not scouts, bounty hunters." Her eyes narrowed. "My people sent them." "Yeah, there's a price." On your head. Vetra laughed bitterly. My own army pays for my death. Mason loaded his rifle. They won't get you. Vetra watched him, then said, Give me a weapon. He shook his head. You can't fight yet. Then I'll die with a weapon in my hand. Mason paused, then tossed her a pistol. Don't miss, she smiled faintly. I won't. Outside, the bounty hunters crept closer. There were 3 of them, one massive and armored, one thin with sharp blades, and one with a plasma cannon, all deadly. All experienced. They had tracked the trail of blood, the broken traps, the bodies of the scouts. And they knew their prey was close. Mason set more traps at the cave's edge, but he knew it wouldn't stop them. These weren't scouts, these were killers. He returned to Vetra. They'll come fast. I'll hold them. If I fall, you shoot. Vetra nodded. She gripped the pistol tightly. Then the attack came. The first bounty hunter, the big one, charged straight in, roaring. Mason fired quickly, hitting its chest. But the armor held. Mason rolled to the side, firing at the thin one that followed, blades slicing the air. A bullet hit its leg. It stumbled but kept coming. Then the plasma cannon fired. A bolt of energy blasted into the cave wall, spraying rocks and dust. Vetra coughed, trying to see. Mason shouted, Stay low. The big hunter swung a heavy hammer, smashing stone. Mason barely dodged, firing again, aiming for the head. One shot hit the eye. The big hunter screamed and fell, but the thin one was faster. It rushed Mason, blades flashing. Mason blocked with his rifle, but the blade cut deep into his arm. He cried out in pain. Dropping the gun, the thin hunter raised its blade for a killing strike. Bang! A pistol fired. The bullet hit the hunter's side. Not fatal, but enough to distract. Mason grabbed his knife and drove it into the hunter's throat. It fell, choking on its own blood. Vetra had fired the shot. Her hands shook, but she had saved him. Then came the plasma cannon hunter. It aimed at Mason. But Vetra wasn't done. She grabbed a grenade Mason had left near her. She pulled the pin with her teeth and threw it with all her strength. The grenade landed near the cannon hunter's feet. Boom! The explosion threw the hunter backward, its weapon destroyed. Mason didn't waste time. He grabbed his rifle and shot the hunter twice, once in the chest, once in the head. Silence. It was over. Mason collapsed against the wall, bleeding but alive. Vetra breathed hard, her arms sore, her heart racing. You did good, Mason said, catching his breath. You too, she replied with a faint smile. Mason laughed weakly. I'm getting too old for this. Vetra looked at the dead bounty hunters. My people really want me dead. Mason nodded. That means you're important. She stared at her hands. I fought. I helped. You saved me, Mason said. Not bad for someone with no legs. Vetra's eyes burned with pride. I'm still a warrior. Mason leaned his head back. Damn right you are. Then he remembered something. He looked at Vetra and said, There's a place. An old human lab not far. They worked on advanced tech. Prosthetics. Artificial limbs. Vetra's eyes lit up. You think they can give me legs? Maybe. But getting there won't be easy. Vetra smiled darkly. Nothing worth having is ever easy. Mason smiled back. That's the spirit. Outside the cave, the wind carried the smell of smoke and blood. But inside, the fire of survival burned stronger than ever. Vetra was no longer just a broken warrior. She was a fighter, and she was ready to rise again. Asterisk. The sky was dark again. Clouds of ash floated like ghosts. The war had left everything broken. Trees, machines, even people. But Sergeant Mason and Vetra kept moving. Mason had built a rough sled, pulling Vetra across rough ground. His body ached, his wounds still healing. But he didn't stop. Vetra held onto her makeshift spear, her eyes scanning the dead land. She didn't complain, not even once. She was done feeling weak. Every mile made her stronger inside. Finally, after 2 days of hard travel, they saw it. A tall metal structure, half buried in dirt and vines. An old human lab left behind when the war spread too fast. Rusted, forgotten, but still standing. This is it, Mason said, breathing hard. They called it Black Core Facility. Top secret human tech. Vetra looked at the dead building. It doesn't look like it holds miracles. Don't judge a book by its cover. Mason muttered. They reached the entrance. A heavy steel door, sealed tight. Mason knocked on it twice, then pressed a small keypad. The old machine still worked, barely. A voice, cold and mechanical, echoed from a hidden speaker. Identify yourself. Mason leaned close. Sergeant Mason, access code, Delta 41. Silence. Then, code expired. State purpose. Mason looked at Vetra, then back. I need help, medical tech. Prosthetics. Silence again. Then the voice said, you carry an alien. Explain. Mason didn't flinch. She's a warrior. She was left for dead. I didn't. Another pause. Then the door unlocked with a deep metallic clank. Welcome, the voice said. But the price will be paid. The door slid open. Mason dragged Vetra inside. The lab was dark, lit by flickering lights. Machines slept in corners. Screens blinked weakly. And in the center stood a humanoid robot, its body sleek, eyes glowing blue. I am Aegis, the AI introduced itself. Last guardian of this facility. Vetra watched it closely. A machine with a mind. A mind sharp enough to judge threats. Aegis replied. Why should I help her? Mason stood tall. Because I ask. You ask. But what does she offer? Vetra's voice was firm. I offer my strength, my skills, my loyalty. Aegis tilted its head. An alien warrior loyal to humans? I was loyal to my people, Vetra said. They left me to die. This human didn't. The AI watched her silently. Then here is the price, Aegis said. If I rebuild you, you will fight for humanity. You will become more than your species. A hybrid of flesh and machine. Vetra didn't blink. I accept. Mason looked at her. You sure? She nodded. I want to stand again. And I'll fight beside you. Aegis stepped forward. Then come, let us begin. Mason helped Vetra onto a surgical table. Machines hummed to life. Robotic arms prepared tools, saws, implants. Vetra grabbed Mason's hand before they started. If I don't wake up, you will, Mason interrupted. You're too stubborn to die. She smiled weakly. Then the machine injected her, and her eyes closed. Hours passed. Mason waited, pacing the dark lab. He hated feeling useless. Aegis worked without rest. Cutting, building, attaching. Replacing what was lost with something stronger. Finally, the AI stepped back. She will wake soon. Aegis said. When Vetra's eyes opened, she felt different. She sat up slowly. Then she looked down. Her legs. They were back, but not flesh. They were metal, sleek and powerful. Shaped like a human's, but better, stronger. Faster. She stood up, shaky at first, then firm. Mason watched, impressed. How do you feel? Vetra smiled, sharp and fierce, tall. She took a step, then another. Her new legs responded perfectly. Aegis spoke. You are now more than alien. You are a weapon. And you belong to no army, but your own choice. Vetra nodded. I choose. And what do you choose? Aegis asked. She looked at Mason. I choose humanity. I choose to fight with him. Mason grinned. Good choice. Vetra clenched her new fists. She was back. Not just whole, but better. Outside, the war still burned. But now, the battlefield would feel her steps again. The sky burned red when Vetra and Sergeant Mason stepped out of the old lab. The wind carried smoke and the distant sounds of war. Explosions echoed like distant thunder. The world was still fighting, but Vetra was different now. She walked on her new legs, sleek, powerful, silent. Every step felt strong, every movement smooth. She was no longer the broken warrior. She was something more. Part alien, part machine, part human spirit. Mason watched her walk ahead, proud. "You sure you're ready?" Vetra glanced back. Eyes sharp. "I've never been more ready." Then Mason's radio buzzed. A human outpost was under attack. A nearby squad of humans was surrounded. Outnumbered. They wouldn't last long. "We can reach them," Mason said. Vetra's fists tightened. "Then let's go." They moved fast like shadows. Vetra's new legs carried her faster than before. Mason kept up, reloading his rifle as he ran. Soon, they reached the battlefield. The outpost was burning. Human soldiers fought desperately, pinned behind broken walls. Alien forces pushed forward, the same army that once left Vetra for dead. Vetra stood on a ridge, looking down. She saw her old army, the generals, the warriors she had once led. They didn't recognize her yet. Mason raised his rifle. "We do this together." Vetra smiled darkly. "Let's show them what they left behind." She leapt from the ridge, her legs pushing her high and far. She landed in the middle of the coyote. Fight with a thunderous crash. Aliens turned, confused. Then they saw her. Metal legs, steel fists, burning eyes. "Vetra?" One of them gasped. She smiled. "You left me to die." Before they could speak, she moved fast like a storm, her metal legs crushed bones. Her fists shattered armor. She grabbed weapons from the fallen and used them with deadly skill. Mason joined in, his rifle firing with precision. Together, they moved like one force, unstoppable. The aliens tried to regroup, but Vetra was too fast, too angry, too alive. "You called me weak," she shouted, smashing the soldier aside. "You said I was finished." Another alien general stepped forward, shocked. "You fight with humans now?" Vetra grabbed him by the throat. "I fight with those who don't leave me behind." She crushed his windpipe and threw him aside. The human soldiers watched in awe. They had never seen an alien fight for them. Like one of them. Vetra stood tall, her body shining with dust and blood. "I stand with humanity," she declared, her voice loud and clear. "Because they stand with me." The alien army broke ranks, retreating in fear. Mason stood beside her, smiling. "Told you, we don't leave anyone behind." Vetra looked at him, breathing hard but smiling. "I believe you now." The battlefield was quiet. The humans cheered, lifting their weapons high. For the first time, Vetra felt something new, not pride from her own strength, but pride in fighting with others, not above them. She had lost her old army, but she had gained something greater, a new family, a new cause. And as the smoke cleared, Vetra whispered to herself, "I was left for dead, but I am more alive than ever."